Okay, I am now recording. So let me just say that again for the benefit of the recording, which I'll do briefly. So just a quick reminder of our plan for the call, which is I'm going to hand over to Lucien Taylor from the DNS Research Federation, talk about Trust Checker and potentially some other things as well. And then time permitting, we touch on some of the recent news headlines, forthcoming events in the next few months, and so on. So that's the plan for the call. Right, so this time, without further ado, Lucien, welcome. Thanks for coming on the call. Really looking forward to this. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Pleased to see you again. It's always great to come on we call it the Andrew Campling show in the office, but it's a very interesting event, and thank you for inviting us to talk to your community. The first thing, just a couple of introductions. It's not going to be just me, it's also Emily Taylor, my partner and business partner, who's going to be talking through some things. It is other matters, other things, and Trust Checker we're going to talk about, because some things that we're working on have kind of eclipsed Trust Checker and are feeding into the future of Trust Checker very much. Some of you already know, we have last October, Google announced a major initiative with us and the Global Anti-Scam Alliance to do the global signal exchange. So we want to give you an update on where that is. Some of you know a bit about that, but it's moving very fast. So we wanted to talk to you about that, because that is really the driver for the data and the threat intelligence information we're getting into Trust Checker, and we're kind of keeping Trust Checker as a toy amongst friends to start with until we've got enough data to really make it really hum. So first of all, I'll just share my slides so that we've got our presentation lined up. Just a quick reminder of who I am. I'm now the CTO of the DNS Research Federation, and I'm managing the whole technical project for the global signal exchange, and we're providing wholesale the whole function for that. Hold on, let me just allow some things at my end. Now you should be seeing, are you seeing, what have I?
You can see your title slide at the moment, overview of global signal exchange.
Great, thanks. Okay, so Emily, if you introduce the first few slides and then I'll take over as it gets a bit more technical.
Thank you. Lovely to be here again, Andrew, and thank you for inviting us back. Yes, so the Global Signal Exchange is a partnership between the Global Anti-Scam Alliance and ourselves at the DNS Research Federation. As of a few days ago, it is a newly formed Dutch cooperative jointly owned by these two non-profit partners. So what problem are we solving? The cost of cybercrime is kind of large, and it doesn't seem to be going down at all. So in 2023, it was estimated to be $8.3 trillion, which is, just as a sort of a comparator, that's equivalent to the joint GDP of the UK and Germany put together. And this year, it's projected to be over $10 trillion. So it's both large and it's growing every year. If you think about the verticals in the fraud attack chain, so a fraud, a phishing attack or other online fraud will typically follow a pathway from establishing an identity or building infrastructure. So whether that's registering a domain name, registering a company name, getting your hosting together, then to building a fake identity, and then to engagement with a victim. They might get an SMS message, they might be on a social media platform, they might be just corresponding by email, but then a conversation will start and then it will go to execution. And so the banks who, as you know, Andrew and colleagues, the banks in the UK have now recently been subject to regulation requiring them to pay back scam victims 50%, the sending banks 50%, the receiving bank. But they may only see a scam for a fraction of a second as a payment is authorized. And there will be that whole hinterland behind it. And then, of course, onward from the execution is the mass manufacture of these scams. So the first thing to say is, number one, they're very fast moving. So response times in order to try and prevent or disrupt those scams will have to be in close to real time. And also that the industry wisdom is that the further to the left of the fraud attack chain you can make your intervention, the more disruption you can have. But at the current time, these industry verticals are not really talking to each other or sharing data with each other in a very successful or systematic way. They might be doing it locally, nationally, but they're almost certainly not doing it internationally. And they're almost certainly not going across sector. So the solution, like cybercrime, has to be cross-sector and has to be international in nature and has to be operating or aspiring to operate at close to real time. Thank you. So what is the Global Signal Exchange, apart from this partnership I've told you about? So this is the response to the question or to the problem space. It is global in nature and is a clearinghouse for real-time sharing of scam and fraud signals. We're currently processing over 73 million results, and actually Lucien was looking at the dashboard just before we went onto this call, and it's now well over, 87 million signals in the last 3 days. So it's growing all the time. We offer 100 feeds. Now, some of those, a handful of those are threat feeds commercially offered. Some are the data from providers like Google. And then there's an awful lot of background data. So the majority of those 100 feeds are actually giving context and enrichment to the abuse feed. So there, Lucien's showing on the screen the feeds that are activated by default, including the Google Shopping, Motion Picture Association, and others. And then there are some commercially available feeds that can be done at a cost plus level. So, Lucien, do you want to carry on with that?
Yeah, so as we get more sort of tech into the platform itself, we have advanced options, sharing. You as a partner of the Global Signal Exchange choose to get who gets access to your signals. And also we've heard from public sector and public safety, sometimes they also want to control what actual data they get as well, because that matters. If you think of the Global Signal Exchange like Heathrow Airport, you're interested in flying with certain carriers and not with other carriers. So in terms of sharing, you can share on a one-to-one basis, or you can share to groups, like you could share for research, or you could share for league table aggregated data and certain trusted organizations. So you can use the exchange literally as an exchange, a pass-through of data. There is a rich API system to connect the Global Signal Exchange to your own environment and have two-way data sharing that way. And we are employing advanced machine learning, AI, and smart matching. Now, I would say, given the colossal amount of data we're now getting as Google's sort of chosen data vendor and many others are coming in, we don't have the compute anymore to actually deal with this in real time. If you can imagine, millions and millions of data events are coming in all the time over the year and masses every day, and to identify and do cluster analysis in that, we need completely redundant services as well. So that's now a big challenge for us. The aim is to identify clusters and areas of common control and patterns that we aren't particularly looking for, but we want to detect from the data itself. Uptake, in terms of uptake, Emily, do you want to just summarize? I mean, I don't want to get legal and get over crossover NDAs and things here, so I'll get our lawyer head to talk about who's actually given us permission to say what and what kinds of organizations, because there are loads.
Okay, so I hope, will have seen an announcement by Google towards the end of last year. We're very proud that they have selected this platform to share threat signals from right across their business. I can say that we're in advanced talks or pilots with 3 other major tech platforms, or big tech, and also 1 other major financial services provider, global financial service provider, has already joined and will be making an announcement shortly. So that's as well as numerous other threat feed providers and data sharers have come on board since our announcement in October. Thank you.
Just to interrupt momentarily, I noticed, I think it was today, an announcement, unless I misread it, so if I did, correct me, Emily, from, I thought it was Visa, saying that they joined the initiative.
Oh yes, thank you very much. I think that maybe that they've joined the Global Anti-Scam Alliance. But,
Yes.
Yes, I think it is. But yeah, we're experiencing a huge amount of interest, Andrew, which is really great to see, and also very exciting for us.
I think we can say another payment gateway provider that's quite major is in deep talks with us, and we've been allowed to say that as well. So I'm hoping there's an event that's been hosted by the Home Office, which we can talk a bit about at the end next month. But I'm hoping a number of public announcements will happen then, because I'm finding this torture. Moving on, what you're looking at is one of 4 services that are planned off the bat. One is developed. That this exchange service is for people who wish to share data or consume data and track where the data is going, and are also interested in the whole action and outcome of sharing that data. So obviously you're looking at 4 key metrics at the top there. One is the exchange service health, how healthy are the feeds coming in that you're relying upon for your business, maybe a security or whatever, and how healthy are your API endpoints and connections out. That's the first place you'll come when things seem to be wrong. The other is your feed quality rating. And I think this is really important, because as a database engineer, I've looked at the feed market for many years now, and we're all depending upon this stuff. If you talk to registries and registrars, they typically say the quality of the domain of the feeds is rubbish. Now, what does that mean? That means that they're looking at feed intelligence that they for things that have been mitigated or historic. They also may or may not believe fairly that the feed vendors, the ones who are making money out of feeds, make money out of number of threat reports on the feed. So they make money out of the longness of the feeds. So we're trying to provide them with tools that can address those issues. What's missing from the entire industry is what we call the feedback loop, sort of 2-way data. It's a rate card, an eBay, a score, a trust rating, whatever you want to call it, for the feed intelligence that's pushed out there, because nobody really knows, and people have got a lot more intelligence to share about that. So if you're sharing a feed, you'll have a feed quality rating that's based upon whether those who depend upon your feed agree or disagree with the intelligence that you're providing. And so you as a feed provider also end up in a kind of rating, a league table, so to speak.
And I should say, just for balance and clarity, that while some people in the domain industry contest the quality of the feeds, people in the feed providing industry say that their feeds are very high quality. But I think the lack of the feedback loop is something that is genuinely acknowledged on all sides as a gap that needs to be filled.
And if we're going to clarify further, there are some in the middle who say, well, we know that some of our feed intelligence is probably bad. It's come from consumers and we don't have enough money to verify it. So really, these are all signals. Until they're verified, confirmed and agreed with, then it becomes evidence-based data. We're talking about signals here. Moving on, customization. So there are 4 services that we're primarily offering. One is for data exchangers. The other is for people who are interested in namespaces. They may be brands, brand protection. Well, we need their engagement because there's a lot of overlap between brand protection and public safety. There are those in, say, public safety who may be following a particular event. We notice that around events, there's often a lot of scam and fraud. Taylor Swift concert tickets, Olympic Games. An event that happened that we were tracking last year was the Microsoft CrowdStrike event. We saw a lot of fraud and scam sites and services being offered in that keyword space. And so we have what's called a keyword alert service. The next one that's top of our list is registries and registrars service. We are aiming to provide for those registrars that have under 50,000 domain names under management. We're offering a free threat intelligence service for them, where they can actually get a rating and threat intelligence for free for their entire stock. For those others, we're still working on services for them. But it gives them an opportunity to review and get some idea about the threat and percentage rating of their own stock, but also to provide feedback about it and to help the community understand what still needs managing, and whether it is or is not their fault, and what has been actually dealt with and is in their views is safe for consumers. Alerts, you can have custom alerts. If you think of some of the big brands out there, they'll get brand infringements and threats and scams using their assets and their identity all the time. And some may run a very small, high quality portfolio and will only want alerts when something hits a high threat alert, and some just don't want it. They'll want a summary every week. And custom APIs so that you can develop your own APIs, both the data and the endpoints that you call to ingest into your own system. This is built on over 20 years of open source library development by our team. It's cloud hosted and standards compliant. One thing we are working on with partners is redundant cloud hosting, so that it's not all on one of the big tech platforms. Standards compliant, MISP and STIX output taxonomies out of the box, and reviewing that all the time. I think I was in the middle of a meeting the other day and went like, can we also come to Etsy and talk about that as well? We have representatives at Etsy, and so we're trying to see where that is valuable for developing standards as well. League tables. I'm going to talk a bit more about the league tables because they sort of fit into the whole trust checker concept. But the league tables is about our 5-step plan to help, with the general landscape of scams and fraud. Step 1 is to measure it. And measuring it is about getting as much data as we can and measuring it and creating measurements that people can really relate to. And one thing that we've developed over the years and seems to be accepted quite readily is the percentage threat report rate. I'm not going to say threat report rate, percentage of reports over average number of domains on stock in the last 365 days. So basically we're saying, how many reports do we count against your average number of stock? Stocks are going up and down. And developed a league table of that. Step 2, so step 1 is to measure it. Step 2 is to make it a sport. Get the competitive juices running. I can go and talk to a European registry and they're not really angry about their overall score. They're angry that Germany or Denmark is ahead of them. So get that competitive spirit. Get them asking the question, why? Why are they ahead of us? Why are we below them? many of you will notice step 5 is celebrate success. So we're talking about people who are at the top of the table, who have the fewest number of reports. We're not about naming and shaming in your face. It's about people who are doing well, the top of the league, so to speak. Step 3 is engage with the change makers. Well, there are lots of registrars I've talked to who want to engage, want to help with the wider problem, even if they believe that they are perfect in their own handling of scams and fraud. They want to help with the bigger picture. Sadly, there are some who don't want to, who don't care, and they clearly don't. And there are others who just feel quite helpless and don't know what to do. Now, the change makers for each of those actors is different. Some of them may need, more strong tactics. They may need some kind of enforcement. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on what you do about those. That's not my job. My job is to reflect what the data is saying to us. Number 4 of our step plan is to provide tools for people, and that's what the GSE platform is all about. It's for people who want to engage, want help, or want to help others to get involved. As I said, Google announced this in October. There was a huge load of interest in this, and they've continued to be very mentoring and supportive. What they're not doing is writing a massive check, which is sad. We are a not-for-profit, we depend upon it, but compute is expensive, engineers are expensive, so we still are really putting out the big bucket here. If any of you have any access to any cash, that really, really does matter to us, because scam and fraud is costing trillions. And, we are trying to set up a global signal exchange. And it's, I'm sure we're enjoying organic growth, but these scammers and fraudsters have developed a business that is bigger than drugs and the mafia around that. So they have loads of money, and they are sharing. They are already really working together. So I'm encouraging everyone here to please try and help us work together on this and try and at least start to tackle this. Finally, it's just to summarize, this is a global cross-sector platform. It's multi-directional signal sharing. It is signal agnostic. We're starting with what I call links, because we try and use the language of consumers, because one of our biggest stakeholders is consumers in this. So we use links, whereas I know we can talk about domains, subdomains, URLs, hosts, URIs, but we just keep trying to, it's things that consumers are getting in SMS messages. I know that they may have subdomains that contain parts of brands that are outside domain name registrars and stuff. We own a registrar ourselves as a playpen, as a toy. We understand the language. We understand the game. We know it. We're trying to move away from blame towards just trying to get on top of the problem in a broader sense. Signal agnostic, so we're not going to just stick around domain names and DNS records. We're also looking at bank account details. We're moving towards the more personal information as well, under what we call protected pathways. And I can talk to you more about that if you're interested. And then obviously our aspiration is towards real-time threat analysis. Everything in the domain name world is about responding within 24 to 72 hours. Everything in the scam and fraud world is under 10 microseconds. And they can tear down and rinse and repeat assets while we're scratching our heads and sending each other emails. So we've got to try and change the speed of the game that we're in between those parties that want to try and help. Finally, Google is aiming to share 100 million signals in 2025. It takes a network to defeat a network. This please join us sounds a bit like the Samaritans. I mean, we actually need your brains as well, and your data, and and willing participation. So Andrew, thanks for inviting me to this. There's a couple of other points I think we wanted to cover, because you wanted us to cover, and that was about Trust Checker. I think Trust Checker is a service that is basically fed by the data that goes into the global signal exchange. And simply put, it is a way of kind of checking the fidelity of one domain at a time. So one domain at a time in our system. It's quite a rudimentary system and it's designed for consumers, but if you bear it in mind, you go to dnsrf.org, you can go and check any link that you're worried about and kind of see if it's been reported in the signal exchange. At the moment, the data is incomplete and we haven't yet got the Google data in there. If I show you what we call a cross-sector analysis, which is a kind of league table. I've talked about the registrar-registry league tables. Another league table that we're developing is sectors, where we're taking like technology, media, sport, health and well-being, home delivery, and we're kind of going sector to sector and picking out some super targets there. So as you'd expect, technology, media and telecoms is top of the stack because they're both victims of fraud and attacks, but they're also inadvertently their assets are being employed to deliver fraud and attacks in breach of terms. Very frustrating for everybody. Number sort of very sort of high up the stack of things like home delivery with outriders that bust their own averages, like Royal Mail, Every, DHL. Now, just thinking about Every there. By the way, these threat reports are 1/10 of what we're now recording since we got Google, and it's the Google data that's now seizing our AI servers. So that's a growing monster, and we're getting help, more and more help with that. But if we think about Every, we had a link last year, which was every-uk.vip. This is a phishing site that attacked my mother-in-law, bless her, basically saying Every's delivering to you, every-uk.vip, and encouraging her to pay some sort of fee for import duty. Should I pay this? I didn't know it was coming from another country. We got the same one, very convincing stuff. We're giving that an A rating because it was only picked up by Spamhaus. In fact, it was dealt with by a number of providers so quickly that they sort of took it down before any of the commercial phishing feeds picked it up. So we know as a consultancy, because we've been tracking this, that Every is toxic and it attacked many people. But I can't give it any more than a trusted rating because the feed intelligence didn't share anything. It was just dealt with unilaterally and it was marked as spam. But in fact, it did a lot of phishing attacks. If I looked in the Whois records, I just looked them up, and their registry is GoDaddy. .vip in the league tables is pretty low down there. There's a lot of threat reports under that space. I don't know why GoDaddy's not doing any. Sorry, GoDaddy, if you're on here, I don't want to name and shame you, but there you go. The registrar is in Hong Kong. They're called, they've just changed. They've also swapped and they've gone to July, a company called July Names. Let me try and move my screen because I can't actually, because of this sharing thing, I can't actually click on the next tab. Here we are. This company here is called July Name, July Name Limited. They're back up and running. And this wasn't routing on Google Chrome when the phishing attack had just happened. So Google saw something, but in fact, they saw it quite late in the day. They saw it after Microsoft, who stopped it on Edge, and a number of other browsers. And a number of telcos took this name down. But it's kind of back up and running. And it's got a good A rating. And this raises a question about toxic links from the past that are then cleaned, laundered by switching registrars, but it's laundered to another registrar in Hong Kong. And if we look at the registrar league table that we've got, this is comparing number of threat reports under stock. Let's take out spam reports to start with. let's look up July names in this league table, and they've got a abuse report rate of 0.6% out of 326 on stock. Now, if we look at GoDaddy, they've got GoDaddy have got nearly 1.5, over 1.5, nearly 1.1% of their stock is under threat reports. I remind you all, this is pre the big data from Google, so I think this whole game is going to change. When we include spam reports, GoDaddy's up to nearly 1% of its stock, and July names is 5%, so it's 5 times the average. So we're looking at a pretty sad, I'm not going to say good or bad, we celebrate success. There are currently 173 registrars with a 0% rate, and we celebrate that success. And you know, this industry of scams and fraud online is bigger than movie making. I'm hoping that in 2 or 3 years' time, we'll be presenting the GSE Oscars for all the people and all the parts of the industry that are at the top of these league tables. But for now, there's a bit of a journey to go. But for that, I'd like to say, I hope you found some of that interesting. I'm going to stop sharing now. And just thank you, Andrew, for inviting us to address your community at this exciting moment in our life anyway.
Sorry, let me just unmute. Fantastic. Thank you, Lucien and Emily. That was really interesting. As you say, so early days, but once you've managed to somehow consume all of that data, which is no small task, hopefully that'll be the underpinnings of an incredibly useful service. And just to sort of underscore one of the things you said, I know from a presentation at the OAuth meeting a week or so ago, some of the data suggests that domains are registered and exploited sometimes within an hour of the registration. They're already being exploited, and they've been discarded within 6 hours. So before they've even appeared on any of the databases, for the point of view of the sort of scammers, they're old news. They've moved on to the next thing. So that speed of response is clearly incredibly important if there's going to be a dent made in this whole sort of industry. Perhaps overstates it, but yeah.
Can I just come in on that, Andrew? Yeah, really agree with your point. And scams are moving at a very rapid. Fraud is a very rapid event online. It's happening within very short time periods. We're currently undertaking a piece of research on the mitigation time taken by registrars and registries to curb sort of reports of if we take the ICANN parlance, DNS abuse, but in this sort of environment, sort of scams and fraud, I suppose. It's currently, I think it's over 3 days, isn't it, Luce? So above the threshold set by the new ICANN contract. But I think also, if you talk to other sectors, say in the UK, I think there's a very, very effective partnership between some of the telcos or ISPs and the banking sector, and they're able to mitigate threats within under a second. So we're very, different. What's normal is very different as you move from sector to sector, and so where we need to be is reducing that time to live as far as possible.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Right. Well, I can see a couple of points in the chat. So Warren has asked how many people look at how recently a domain was registered as part of the threat protection solution. I don't think there's anyone on from any of the threat feeds on this call, but I do know the likes of Spamhaus and others do look at recent registration. I think, and some of the companies like Infoblox and others, effectively quarantine newly registered domains. That's probably not the best description of it, but
I might be able to help with this. When we get, for every threat report we get every day, and it's 24-hour process, we then go and harvest what metadata we can about it. So the freshness of the domain name is certainly collected by us. And we also monitor other factors that may be of interest, like DNS record changes and others. Another thing we have is a sort of mitigation crawl, just to see whether we can see in terms of the online presence, whether, and the factors that we can look at, whether something's obviously been mitigated, we believe. And that will go together to be coupled with other feedback we get from other players in the industry to determine whether something's in the white noise that we don't have to worry about. Because what we're trying to do is squeeze the balloon. And, people say you're just squeezing the balloon of the problems to the bulge, but at least you're only got to concentrate on the bulge and not actually on everything else. And at the moment, we're trying to rapidly differentiate between white noise and passive and active threats.
There's a
brilliant.
question from David as well.
About Quad 9.
About Quad 9. David, thank you for the question. We've been in dialogue with Quad 9 for ages, and we think they're absolutely fantastic. We would love them to be a partner. I think that we're in dialogue. Fingers crossed.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, I'm conscious of the time, but does anyone else want to come in with any comments or questions? And if so, either just unmute or put something in the chat, whichever is easiest. I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that. I'm not seeing anything else.
I'll put in a chat just follow the URL, and there's a sort of join contact form on that, and the global, there's some help videos and things, and also just that will send a message to our partner Yuri Abrahams from the Global Anti-Scam Alliance and his team, who will engage with you about any matters that you may be interested in. And hopefully they'll then pass you over to the tech side. And we're really happily setting up pilots for a number of different organizations to model the things that they are interested in, and to work with them, with our engineers, to show how effective this can be. I mean, there's nothing like having a whole mass of threat intelligence. It's really very, very interesting. If you're a brand, or if you know any brands, we're finding a lot of stuff, a lot of abuse of your assets out there, as they are so attractive and reassuring to victims. So happy to work with any of you if you want to take this a bit further forward.
Okay, fantastic. Right, we'll close the queue. I've got two hands up though. Nigel first, and then Michael. So Nigel, do you want to unmute and jump in?
Yes. Thank you so much, and I can be very brief. And thanks, Emily and Lucien, and really very interesting indeed. And so glad it's all coming together. I'm just going to ask. I think you mentioned some work at the Home Office you were doing, or some further dialogue that was taking place. I just wondered anything more on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Nigel. Lovely to see you. Thank you for your comments. So the Home Office convenes a group of UK stakeholders who are interested in fighting scams and abuse. We are part of that group, so that group meets regularly, exchanges information, and sort of it's a very successful model that could well be followed internationally, I believe, in my personal opinion, because it's bringing together stakeholders from across the different different industry verticals, and includes some non-profits like ourselves. So the Home Office is also, I think, helping Yuri to put on his Global Anti-Scam Summit at the end of March, which is the 26th and 27th of March. So if it's not in your diaries, put it in your diaries. They are always really great events that the Gaza team put on. So I do encourage you to attend if you're in town.
Fantastic, thanks for that. Michael, do you want to jump in?
Hi. Yeah. So as I understood, what a lot of what you're doing is, in many cases, these are domains. We had a presentation a couple of months ago about something from the Netherlands. I can't remember who it was. Peter maybe involved. I don't know. Anyway, so they're basically abusing registrations on well-known brands or events or something like this to push scam relating to presumably that product. That's what I understood to be the case.
Thank you, Michael, and lovely to hear your voice again. Hope all is well. So there's actually a variety of reasons why. Oh, hi, nice to see you as well. A variety of reasons why the different people feeding in and sharing data might have flagged domains. So they might not look like anything. They might look like a bunch of junk. You know, there's a lot of the kind of bulk registrations are just like 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But they have been reported or identified as problematic either for phishing, distribution of malware. Actually, we're getting a lot of IP addresses involved in the distribution of malware and other fraudulent or scam-like related things. So there isn't really any bar where you say it must be a this, it just must be of concern. So it's much more like the smoke rather than the fire, or the neighborhood watch type of thing. And it's really up to the participants in the exchange to make of it what they will and to make whatever actions or take whatever actions are appropriate for them, if at all.
So I was just thinking as you guys were talking, I was thinking like, why do certain brands seem to get spam against them far more often than other brands? And, and to what extent is the brand culpable, involved, plausible deniability versus not. And, but you're dealing with a bigger, more random problem than that. Okay.
I'm going to answer this by naming and shaming a couple. That'd be fun. A big sector that's a problem is the home delivery sector, the DHLs, the Everys. And the simple answer to that is that their brands are employed because they're just part of everyday life and they're so scammable, and they represent unusual activity where the victim is more vulnerable. So our research shows that if you've just arrived in an airport and you get a text from your car hire company, you're more likely to believe something that you just don't understand. If you're expecting a delivery from anybody and you're asked to pay 69p top up because somebody tried to deliver to you the day before, you're more likely to believe that. So there are certain brands that are really at what I call the front line of scams and fraud, and are part of the supply that's making it really bad for everybody and difficult for everybody. And there are some brands where we just don't understand. Is there anybody from Apple here?
Not on the call at the moment. From a quick scan down the list.
I'm doing a constant appeal because we're talking to all the big tech except Apple, and it's very hard to have any conversations with Apple at all and to find out more. So we could get there's many more things that we need to know, but we're just on this journey, and a lot of people are now decided to be very generous with their data.
I've had 3 Apple computers delivered to my house based on fraudulent credit cards. And in one case, I really tried to reach out to the police and to the credit card companies, okay, because I knew there was another one coming based on the things, and the credit card companies were completely uninterested in anything. And the police called me back 6 months later saying, oh, but we even have a, in this case, it's a FedEx ground vehicle and uniform ready to do a sting. And I said, you're 6 months late. You needed to answer me within hours, and you were uninterested, right? Your front desk people were completely uninterested. And And then when I actually ordered an Apple last year, I had to go through, you wouldn't believe how many conniptions with my credit card company to convince them it was a legitimate purchase.
So room for improvement, I think, all round, don't you, Michael?
Yeah.
Carl put his hand up.
You're on mute. If it was you, Carl.
Yeah, sorry, I was failing to find the unmute button. The other thing I observe here is that I periodically get what turns out to be legitimate requests from, for example, my local doctor's surgery send me a thing going, can you complete this questionnaire, for example, and eventually if I need to pop in there for something, they go, oh, we sent you this questionnaire, why didn't you respond? And you go, well, because the link you put in your text message to me looked so unbelievably scammy that actually sometimes then they don't help themselves, and it doesn't help non-technical members of the public when they get links that look unbelievably scammy that are legitimate, and then they get things that look more legitimate that are scams. How are non-technical members of the public supposed to not fall into these holes?
It's so confusing, and almost everybody that you meet believes that they've been scammed. And sometimes you hear their story and I don't think they've been scammed at all. They've just had the sort of communication that you've described, Carl. And I completely agree with you. We have the situation at the moment where legitimate companies' communications look like scams and scam communications look legitimate.
Yeah.
And the poor consumer is left with the burden of all of this and are losing tons and tons of money. And you know, the other end of the criminal justice scale is enormously depressing. With this inherently transnational type of crime, hardly anybody goes to jail. So if you were in that business is great at the moment. And, you know, this is a real moment where I think, you know, well-intentioned people, law-abiding people really do need to get it together and come together if they can to cooperate. But thank you very much for raising that point. It's incredibly important and muddies the water, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay, right. Final question to Chris, then we will need to just briefly move on, which is, it's good to have lots of interest, which is fantastic. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks. It's more of an observation than a question, really. But I was thinking about, you know, what if there was a trusted platform where people can get notifications from delivery companies, doctors, dentists, and stuff, because text message is not a secure thing to use for any of this. So, yeah, more of an observation, really.
Okay.
Cheers.
Well, that's maybe an interesting thought for future exploration, but yes.
I guess they sort of like, sorry, Andrew, but just a very quick response on Chris's point is like, it's easy to forget because we're so overwhelmed with the problems of the digital era that we've really only been doing this for mass consumption of digitization for 25 years, and we still haven't worked out some really, really basic stuff. Hopefully the next 25 years will be a bit better.
Gosh,
if we survive.
There's a cheery thought to finish on. No, seriously, that really interesting. You obviously, I think, struck a vein of interest there. I should have asked at the start, but I forgot because of my own tech troubles. Lucien, are you happy and Emily to share the slides post-call? Yeah, fantastic. And then hopefully this will be the start of a conversation. So marvellous. Really interesting as always. Thank you for that. Let me just very briefly mention a couple of other things, one of which is also, or at least one of which is related in this general area. Okay, so just briefly, a few interesting things in the news, including some stuff, as you can see, around who is. amongst other things. Lots of sort of general discussion in this area. DNS abuse, Top DNS have got a session they've just announced on that. Let me just see if I can spy the one. Oh yes, sorry, bottom of this sort of slide, you'll see also from the DNS Research Federation some lessons on know your customer from the cryptocurrencies. The know your customer aspect of domain registration is a solved problem in other industries. I mean, frankly, if you're having to learn from the cryptocurrency industry, that's maybe a signal you must aspire to do better. But that's just me. But certainly the finance sector more generally, know your customer is definitely a solved problem, or a lot more solved than it is in the sort of from the perspective of registrants, where certainly in some parts of the world there's significant room for improvement. There's a whole bunch of other stuff, but we won't have time for that. It's in the weekly sort of headlines email for you to peruse. I'll maybe just highlight at the bottom of the screen. You'll recall, hopefully, the Internet Governance Forum is middle of the year this year, to try and squeeze it in before the UN sort of continues its deliberations on WSIS plus 20. There's already in the last few days an announcement for a call for session proposals, as well as support for participants and journalists from the Global South. But probably for the people on this call, the main one being a call for session proposals has been announced. So that's mainly for your awareness. As always, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that caught my eye this week that we won't have time to talk about, but peruse at your leisure. In terms of deadlines coming up, anyone from the Global South that's listening to the recording, you got till end of today to apply for travel support from the IGF. There's also a sort of some multi-stakeholder engagement from the European Commission on WSIS plus 20 for later on this week, and then a few deadlines a bit later than that. So those are probably the two primary ones to highlight that are sort of coming up at the moment. A whole host of events, too numerous to mention, but since it was I think Emily mentioned it, you'll see towards the bottom of the screen the Global Anti-Scam Alliance 26th, 27th of March. Amongst many other things over the next couple of months. And then finally, I'm hoping to have one of the Domain Tools team on the call this time next week, just waiting for that to confirm. And then the week after, just being finalised to talk about sort of DNS abuse and transit domains, a topic that we just touched on very briefly in the discussion just now. So that's on the agenda for the next couple of weeks, but we're just about on the hour. So let me stop sharing and say thank you for our sponsors, DNS OR, for sponsoring the call, and just check, does anyone else have any last points you want to jump in on, anything that you think you need to highlight to others on the call or watching the recording just before we wrap up in the last 30 seconds or so? And if so, just unmute and say it, or put it in the chat. Can't see anyone typing, no one's unmuted. In which case, let me say thank you, Lucien and Emily, for a really interesting presentation, as always. Hope there'll be some follow-up post-call to add even more strength to this initiative, although it seems to be doing pretty well so far. If you've got Microsoft and sort of Google involved, that's a decent start by any reasonable measure. But hopefully there'll be even more stakeholders will join in. So with that in mind, have a fantastic week, everyone, and I look forward to catching up same time next week. So see you all then. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.